What we need is for all social media accounts to be verified by ID, by your passport or your driver's license or a bank statement with your address on it, just something so that every social media account, Facebook, YouTube, Tinder, if that's what you use, any of these things are verified by ID because it's a solution to a problem. You see, there's a hobgoblin on the loose, and if we make everybody verify their ID for their social media, so there's no anonymous social media anymore, then this is a step in the right direction to solve the hobgoblin problem. Now you might be wondering, what's the hobgoblin? Let me explain to you what the hobgoblin is. The hobgoblin might be the terrorists. It might be the invisible body-possessing demons that the masses know as a virus. It doesn't really matter what the hobgoblin is. Verified ID is going to solve our problems, and I can prove it to you right now. Check this out.
The federal government is considering a ban on anonymous social media accounts
Good, because we need to solve this hobgoblin problem.
as part of major changes to tackle the scourge of
Terrorists, of invisible body-possessing demons, of the Russians with their nukes. Which scourge are we going to be solving with this solution?
domestic violence.
Domestic violence. Why didn't I think of that? We need everybody to verify with ID, their passport or whatever, their Facebook and all these other accounts to tackle domestic violence, of course. Why didn't I think of that?
Live to political reporter Andrea Crothers. Andrea, what would this involve?
Yeah, Andrea, what would this involve?
Well, Danica, this latest push for a social media crackdown comes from a parliamentary inquiry into family, domestic and sexual violence.
Family domestic violence, of course. There's a scourge of hobgoblins out there who are constantly engaging in domestic violence. So if you and everybody else has to verify with their ID their social media accounts, which for most people is most of their internet use these days, this will help solve the domestic violence problem, of course.
Now, it wants to make it mandatory, required by law, to hand over 100 points of identification.
100 points of ID, which I don't know if you have a similar thing in your country. I imagine you do. That would be your license, and your passport would be 100 points of ID. Do they make you give your bank statement with your address as part of 120 points or whatever? I can't remember, but you get the idea. Just your license or your passport or a few things, and that way we know that you're really you on social media to help solve the domestic violence hobgoblin.
In a bid to stop anonymous accounts from getting put up in the first place. So that means that you could be required to hand over your passport or your driver's licence just to set up or maintain existing social media or...
To set up or maintain existing social media accounts. So even if you already have your Facebook and your Instagram or what have you, if Australia brings in this kind of legislation or rules or whatever they call it, this way everyone has to ID who they are on the internet to solve the hobgoblin problem.
dating accounts. So
Dating
this particular
accounts.
inquiry found that
Hold on.
online media or dating accounts. So
Even your
this
dating
particular
accounts.
inquiry found that online abusers face particularly little risk when it comes to punishment.
Yeah, there's just not enough rules to stop that. So we need to add a new rule to help stop it, of course.
So the idea is that if you are required to have this, it really lifts that veil of anonymity, therefore making it easier for police to track down users and potentially also stopping people in their tracks in the first place by deterring them from carrying out this form of online abuse, Danica.
Andrea, thank you.
Brilliant. Why didn't I think of that? Why didn't Zuckerberg, who was on the screen just a moment ago, why didn't he and all of his friends think of this right from the beginning? Why didn't they do this right at the beginning? When you sign up to Facebook or to MySpace back in the day or whatever you use, Tinder as she was saying before, dating apps, just make it so you have to use ID from the beginning. Why didn't they do that? Why didn't we think of that? Maybe because what they wanted was everyone to get hooked on these apps and to make it so normal that you kind of need them to operate. For most people, they feel some need to have these apps. Most people feel that way in the Western world today, in most of the world today, I would argue. But if you had an ID requirement, maybe people wouldn't have signed up so quickly. But now that everyone's there, aha! By the way, if you want to maintain this app, you're going to have to send us your passport or your license. Don't worry about it, just send it in, just photocopy it, get it notarized, get it stamped by someone who can confirm that it's you, and bang, you're in, no problem. You get to keep your account. If you don't send in your ID, maybe you can't use your apps anymore. And some of you are thinking, that's okay, I don't want to use the apps anymore anyway. Yes, you do. Yes, I think you do. This is coming, whether you like it or not. And here's the good thing. This is going to solve the hobgoblin problem. This is going to solve not the terrorists, the invisible body possessing. Actually, no, not that. What was the it was the domestic. That's right, the domestic violence. This is going to solve the domestic violence scourge that's going on out there, and we know it's going on because we see advertisements for it in newspapers and on the television and at bus stops. You see the image of the man and the woman on the ground cowering. It's like, yeah, that's how we know it's happening. I've never seen or heard of it happening in my real life. I know a couple of guys where their girlfriends physically assaulted. I know one guy, his now ex-girlfriend, thank heavens, at the time they were together, she threw a ceramic plate at his head. Fortunately, he was able to parry it away. I think it only hurt his wrist or something like that. But I've heard of that kind of thing happening. So I guess that does... I know a few people where something similar to that has happened, where the girlfriend has abused the guy, which is just all kinds of bizarre. I've never seen or heard of in real life the what we see in the advertisements, but I'm sure it's real. They wouldn't tell us that it's a big problem if it wasn't. So this is going to solve that problem, and all we've got to do is verify our social media. Now, this isn't happening yet in Australia, but it will soon, thank heavens. It might take a year, might take 3 years, 5 years, but this is where we're headed, whether you like it or not. And again, just remember, this is to save whatever the problem is. Now, there's a link in the info box below, and it's to some of my favorite quotes. It's a free page. These all took me a little while to put them on the quote thing there. But I noticed there was this problem where so many quotes on the internet, there's no source for them. They're not real. You've probably noticed the same thing. So I wanted to check the books themselves to make sure these quotes are real. And the ones that I could confirm are real, I took my favorites and turned them into image quotes. So I'll put a link to this in the info box below. I recommend you go and check it out. And let me know in the comment section below, how willingly will you be getting your ID ready, your passport, send it into Facebook or into YouTube or into Tinder or whatever. Maybe into the government, maybe they have some central, I don't know. But I mean, why wouldn't you do this? This is going to help solve the hobgoblin problem. And let's not forget, the whole aim of practical politics is to keep the populace alarmed, and hence clamorous to be led to safety, by an endless series of hobgoblins, most of them imaginary. H.L. Mencken, ironically, in Defense of Women, 1918, chapter 13. Link to all those quotes in the info box below. Go and check them out, and let me know in the comment section below how excited you are that finally we're going to put an end to the hobgoblin problem.